Okay, welcome back everybody. Raccoon MMA here. Sorry I didn't get you another video between my picks, but that's okay. I have a life. You know how it is. But it's UFC 308 fight week. This will come out on a Thursday, so I guess it's just a few days before the fights. Huge card in Abu Dhabi. First Abu Dhabi card in a while, not headlined by Islam Makhachev. I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward to it because we got some bangers on here, including potentially the most important fight of the year in the main event. So let's just get right into it. Before we start, of course, my MMA culpa. These are my stats for my picks. According to official results, I have a 62% accuracy, so I've picked 108 fights. 66 of those have been correct. One of them has been a no contest. With that being said, 8 of those fights, I believe, were robberies. That's jumped up from last time. Jose Aldo, Raquel Pennington. People are getting robbed out here. And if you flip all of those my way, of course, you might flip some of them, you might not, but that could bring me to a maximum of 69% accuracy on my picks. In terms of my method, so that is, if I pick a fight and I say I think it's going to end by TKO, I have a 71% accuracy. So 49 of my correct picks have had the method included. 35 of those have been correct, 14 incorrect. That gives me a 71% accuracy. We're going to start out with some quick picks. So I'm not going to get too deep into these ones. We start out with Mateusz Rebecki and Mikvatek Orolbai. This should be fun. Two guys who hit hard, sort of very strong in terms of their clinch work, their ground work, like a real sort of Clash the Titans type of fight, but it's at lightweight. Should be really good. Rebecki always puts on fun fights. Everyone knows who Orolbai is. Also always puts on fun fights. We also have Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Carlos Leal. Of course, Rinat was supposed to fight Nursultan Ruziboyev, but he couldn't make it. So now Carlos Leal, a former PFL fighter, is making his debut on short notice to fight Rinat. People have noted that Leal is a competent grappler and should actually be able to disrupt some of Rinat's game. So that should be fun to see. My picks for these two, I believe that Orolbai and Rinat are going to get it done. Two more quick picks. Jeff Neal versus the former lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos, and Shara Bullet Magomedov versus Armen Petrosyan. Both of these should be fun stand-up battles unless RDA manages to take Jeff Neal to the ground, at which point he should win, but I don't think he will because I think that Jeff Neal is too big for him. He hits too hard for him. RDA is essentially a lightweight. This is a really tough fight for him for his first transition to being a full-time welterweight. And then Shara Bullet, Armen Petrosyan. I think this is a much more competitive fight than people giving it credit for. I don't think that, Shara Bullet is the type of guy who just automatically wins any fight as long as it's on the feet. I don't think anybody does that, but he's not the middleweight Alex Pereira or anything like that. But I think he's just too fundamentally sound. So I'm going to pick Jeff Neal and Shara Bullet in these ones. New feature in today's video, which we'll trial going forward, is I have to pick an underdog for the night. And my underdog pick for the night is Dan Ige. I think he beats Lerone Murphy. I think that his experience comes out. I think the fact that he hits really hard will come out in this fight. I think that Lerone Murphy did not react well being hit hard by Edson Barbosa in his last fight, even though he won that fight ultimately. I think that Dan Ige has looked very good against the parts of the game that Lerone Murphy, in terms of the clinch and the takedowns, and then sort of using the striking to get into the clinch and the clinch to get into the striking and things like that. The sort of transitional game that Lerone Murphy is really good at. I really liked what we saw of Dan Ige in his last fight against Diego Lopez on 4 hours' notice. So this is not going to affect sort of my numbers, because if it came down to it, I probably would pick Lerone Murphy. But if I have to pick an underdog on this card, and I don't mean an underdog like Max Holloway being an underdog to Ilia Topuria, because that is actually a 50-50 fight. I mean, like a real underdog, someone who's not expected to win. If I have to pick one, it's going to be Dan Ige. I think that he has a real shot of getting it done. Okay, moving on to our more detailed picks. We're going to start off with the most useless fight of all time, Magomed Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakic. This fight pisses me off. It should not have been made. I think there are probably 3 guys at light heavyweight who are capable of beating Alex Pereira at this point, I would say that it's Nikita Krylov, Magomed Ankalaev, and Alexander Rakic. And what do I mean by this? I mean these are people who are competent strikers. I mean, all these people strike first, but competent strikers with good grappling who are smart enough to not just nakedly shoot a takedown, but to actually set up a takedown with their striking, and good enough at striking to hang on the feet, long enough to actually make the setup, right? In the sense that, someone like Jamal Hill, even if he was going to shoot a takedown, isn't a good enough striker to actually hang with Alex Pereira on the feet, right? So I guess my point here being that two of the three people who I think could actually pose a real challenge to the champion in this division are now being set up to fight, which means that we're wasting one of them. Especially because apparently Magomed Ankalaev has been told by the UFC that if he doesn't put on an entertaining fight, he's not getting the title shot. Rakic, I assume, if he beats Ankalaev, just gets the title shot, which makes sense. I think the winner of this fight should get the title shot. I don't actually know if this fight is going to be fun, right? Because these are two really clean strikers, right? They both hit reasonably hard. They both have good striking accuracy. They have good range. Rakic's kicking game is really good. Ankalaev's boxing is really good. But they're both kind of rangy and clean. Like, they're never going to exchange with each other, right? And that's when you create these moments where you can really wobble somebody. That's where you create these moments where you can really, put somebody out. Not saying that you can't. Both of these guys have some incredible highlights, real KOs at range. I'm thinking of a head kick from each of them. But I think that there's a decent chance that they're both going to be doing a lot of circling. Now, could one of them engage in the grappling? Yes. I think probably Rakic is more likely to. But I think that Ankalaev he's Dagestani, right? And he trains with grapplers, even if he is a striker. He's going to be a good enough grappler to mean that Rakic won't actually be able to effectively work against him. I think that in the end, what this fight is going to come down to is Rakic seems... he's very skilled, but he seems to have cardio problems and he seems to have chin problems, right? Like, he was beating the hell out of Yuri Prohaska, and then Yuri Prohaska just bit down in his mouth guard and hit him, right? And these are problems that Ankalaev does not seem to have, right? Like, we've seen him go 5 rounds, no problem. We've seen him and really dig it out in the championship rounds when he fought Jan Blachowicz for the title, which of course came to a draw. And we've seen him overcome adversity in that fight too. And he had the sort of the 5-round camp at the very least for Johnny Walker, even though he knocked him out very quickly. Rakic, his cardio is suspect, right? He faded towards the end of round 1 against Yuri Prohaska. And I don't know, I don't think that the amount of turnaround he's had after UFC 300 has really been enough to fix the cardio problems. Now, they're saying he was on antibiotics in that fight. So if he was on antibiotics in that fight, he may look better, but I can't really take a coach's word for who has staff, who doesn't have staff, right? I just have to look at what I've seen in the fights, and according to recent performances, Rakic coming off of a several-year layoff, and then having that fight with Yuri, and Ankalaev against Johnny Walker twice, but really Ankalaev's most recent fight against Johnny Walker. Ankalaev looks, I think, just a bit better. I think that he looks like he's hitting harder. He's got the better cardio. He's got the better chin. And I know this is a 3-round fight, but I just think that as this goes past the round and a half mark, Ankalaev is really going to take over. I think he wins by decision, but I think that there's a good chance he finishes him late. But my pick will be Magomed Ankalaev by 3-round decision. I'm reasonably confident, 65% confident in that pick. But I think that Rakic could really get it done. He's called the dark horse of the division for a reason. He's got a lot there, and I think that if he does win this fight, he gives Alex Pereira a real run for his money. Okay, moving on to our co-main event. Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. This is a fight that we have wanted to see for a while. It was booked for, I think, June. And then Chimaev had health problems and had to pull out. Whittaker, of course, then took Ikram Aliskerov, stepping up on a week's notice or something like that, and knocked him out. Made me very sad. I really like Ikram. I think he's probably my favorite middleweight. But, of course, huge respects to Whittaker. He's one of the GOATs. This is an interesting fight, right? This is on paper at least, your classic striker versus grappler matchup. You look into it a bit deeper and you look at Robert Whittaker's abortive career as an amateur wrestler on the Australian national team, and his really effective work against people like Yoel Romero, across 10 rounds against Yoel Romero, or Derek Brunson, like his really solid defensive wrestling, especially against the cage. And then, of course, you can look at Khamzat Chimaev and some of his really excellent striking work that he's done against people like Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, i.e. people who are able to resist him to some level in the grappling and in the wrestling. And so we see out of Chimaev that he hits hard. He's got a really good jab. He works well out of both stances. He does have one-punch knockout power, but I don't know if Robert Whittaker is an equivalent fighter to Gerald Meerschaert at 185. But Khamzat is really good. He's really, really good. On the feet, on the ground, in the same way that Robert Whittaker, I mean, we don't really see him going out here and submitting people, but we do see him defending takedowns, getting back up really effectively. He's got a sort of a rangier style. He likes to sort of bounce in and out. He works well off of a rhythm. And he is not a knockout artist. I mean, everyone will see in the lead up to this fight, in his highlight reels, that first round knockout over Ikram Alaskarov, and especially Robert Whittaker partisans will like to use that because people will be like, oh, Ikram Alaskarov is like Khamzat Chimaev because I guess he has a beard with no mustache and likes to wrestle. And because he fought Khamzat Chimaev on the regional scene and defended a takedown against him. Which I believe he was the first person to successfully do up until Chimaev fought Gilbert Burns. But in any case, this doesn't mean that Robert Whittaker is a knockout artist. Of course, that was an unranked guy on a week's notice against Robert Whittaker, but also he had to cut weight twice because he was booked to fight the Saturday prior, and then he had to stop his weight cut, rehydrate, and whatever, fill back up, fly to Saudi Arabia, and then do the weight cut again. And I don't want to discount Robert Whittaker's win. What he did to Ikram is very impressive, right? Just because I'm an Ikram fan doesn't mean I don't have a tremendous amount of respect to Robert Whittaker, and I know how hard it is to beat someone like Ikram Alaskarov. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think that Robert Whittaker has that flash knockout power, and I think that just because he got that flash knockout over Ikram Alaskarov doesn't mean that that's something that he's going to be consistently capable of going forward, unless the reason that he got that is because the UFC is not really testing for steroids anymore. But if you look at his physique, he doesn't really look like this is a man who's doping, and I don't think he would. So I think that if Whittaker wins, it's not going to be one of those cases where he stuffs a takedown and then just hits Chimaev with something. I think that it would come a lot later, if at all. One of the areas where Chimaev's going to have a real advantage over Robert Whittaker is if he does take the fight to the ground. I think that there's a difference between stuffing a takedown and then being taken down and surviving the submission threat onslaught that is Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, you can say what you want about the short notice, but he had Kamaru Usman in a lot of trouble in their first round, right? He had a choke locked in, and that's Kamaru Usman. I mean, that's a grappler first. So, if he does get Whittaker to the ground, I think that there is a very good chance that he can, cause problems there. With that being said, though, this is also the first, real middleweight that Khamzat has faced since his permanent move to the division. Obviously, when he was debuting and trying to fight every week, he was moving up and down between middleweight and welterweight. But now he's a full-time middleweight because he can't cut to welterweight anymore because of his health problems. Whittaker is the first guy who is a natural middleweight, is the right size for middleweight, is the right strength for middleweight, rather than just Kamaru Usman not cutting as much weight, right? So I think that this is then going to be interesting, right? It's like in these clinch exchanges, in the grappling exchanges against the cage, is Robert Whittaker going to be able to make up for probably to some extent a technique gulf by not necessarily being stronger than Chimaev, but at least being stronger than Chimaev is used to, potentially, right? And I think that ultimately, Chimaev has shown brilliance when things are going his way, and he's shown a lot of heart when things aren't going his way. And only 2 people have ever taken him to decision, but in the UFC. But at the same time, like, we do see him start to fade as the fight goes on. Not always, right? When he fought Gilbert Burns, he won the first, lost the second, won the third. But Gilbert also faded in that fight. And I think, when we saw him fight Kamaru Usman, it was just a decline, right? If that fight was a Khamzat win, he won the first very easily, he won the second very narrowly, and he lost the third. Personally, I scored it a draw. So I think then and everyone knows this, right? But the dynamic of this fight is going to be, is Khamzat going to finish Whittaker early, probably in the first round, maybe in the second? Or is Whittaker going to be able to survive the onslaught and really, make something out of it in the later rounds? Whittaker also knows this. I assume that Chimaev knows this, although maybe they're going to come into this fight with the mindset of, let's not blow our gas tank in the first round. But I think that if they do come into the fight with that mindset, then it will just be another case of Robert Whittaker versus Yoel Romero, where, and remember, like, before you say Khamzat Chimaev is not Yoel Romero, remember, Yoel Romero is an Olympic wrestler. But it will be another one of those cases where, Whittaker will have to defend these shots as time goes on, but it won't be as dangerous because it just won't be that, endless onslaught of different things happening. Okay, here's a shot, here's another shot, now he's hitting you, now he's kicking you, now, right? Like the classic Khamzat Chimaev that we're used to, where he just runs across the cage at you, picks you up, slams you down, and does whatever he wants, right? So, if he does pursue that game plan, and of course, like, Chimaev will gas anyways if he tries not to gas. Like, he'll get, at the very least, he'll get more tired, he'll slow down a little bit. So I think that if he does try and sort of play it safe, and that is just a realm where Whittaker can thrive. If he doesn't, I think there is a very good chance that he gets Whittaker out of there early and just overwhelms him. But I think that there's an equally good chance that Whittaker is able to survive, especially now that he's had 2 camps for this guy, that Whittaker is able to survive and able to take over in the late rounds. Do I think that he can knock him out? Yes. Do I think that he will? No. I think that Whittaker wins this one by decision. I'm not as confident because, again, I think that Khamzat Chimaev is very, very good, and I think there's a very good chance that he is able to take Whittaker down and submit him early. But I think if he doesn't, then the fight's going one way, and if he doesn't try, then the fight's going the same way. Whittaker by decision. Okay, our main event. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. The undisputed champion versus the BMF. Guys, this is a fantastic fight. I'm really looking forward to this one. What do I even say? 2 really great boxers. Obviously they're more than that. Ilia Topuria has an excellent leg kick. And a somewhat mythical but supposedly good ground game. And Max Holloway, of course, he's got the spinning kicks, and he's shown that when he is being outclassed in the striking, that he is able to wrestle, notably against Yair Rodriguez. So, in a sense, this is not just going to be a 4-ounce boxing match, but this will be a real fight. I think that both these guys are going to want to engage primarily in the striking, but a fight's a fight. It might not go there the entire time. So Ilia Topuria, of course, is coming off of a win over Alexander Volkanovski. That's something that Max Holloway had 3 cracks at least according to the judges, was never able to do. A lot of us think he did win the second fight against Volkanovski, but he got outclassed so badly in the third that it doesn't really matter. And Topuria, of course, he knocked him out in the second. With the caveat that was a heavily compromised Volkanovski coming off of a knockout defeat by Islam Makhachev just a few months prior. Islam knocked him out in October, and Volk came back in February, which means maybe a month off before he was back in camp. And taking shots to the head and getting wrestled and having his brain rattled around and things like that. So I do want to add that caveat. I'm being forced to admit to myself that Ilia Topuria is very good. But I think that his record does not really speak for itself in the way that the record of somebody like Max Holloway speaks for itself, right? If you take Volkanovski and Dustin Poirier up a weight class, out of Max Holloway's resume, he would be on a 19 fight win streak. As it was, he had a 12 fight win streak. He is one of the greatest featherweights of all time. He's number one or he's number two. He's a really incredible fighter. He uses his range really well. He uses his volume really well. He's great with the footwork. On the other side of the cage, Ilia Topuria is also a boxer. He's much more heavy-handed than Max Holloway, but in the same way as Max, he's really good with his combinations. He's got a really good leg kick that he kind of uses to corral people. Kind of makes up for his slower, more plodding footwork. But he's not bad at cutting the cage off. And yeah, he hits really hard. He clubs you. When I look at people being punched by Ilia Topuria, it looks like they're being hit by a baseball bat. Whereas Max Holloway, obviously does have 2 straight knockouts, but those come from, in the case of the Korean Zombie, that knockout came from Max Holloway just being on a completely different level as a fighter, and that's no disrespect to TKZ. And in the case of Justin Gaethje, that was after 24 minutes and 59 seconds of Gaethje being absolutely drubbed and being way too tired to keep his hands up and protect his chin. And usually when Max Holloway knocks people out, that's how he does it, right? He uses his volume, he works the body, you drop your hands, and he hits you. That's how he knocked out Jose Aldo twice. It's very impressive. And that's just what he does, right? And I think that with Holloway, it's very interesting because he lost the belt, the undisputed featherweight title, 5 years ago. So if he wins it back, I think he would just be second to Carla Esparza in terms of length between title reigns. Carla lost her title to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and then 7 years later won it back against Rose Namajunas, which is very impressive. But Max, it would be about 5 years since he lost his title. He would win it back. And in that time, he has improved immeasurably. The Max Holloway that we saw fight Volkanovski the first time, or even the second time, people said that's like prime, that's peak Max Holloway, like it's the best Max we've ever seen, and the best Max we'll ever see, which is why, when he came back after, losing the second fight and he fought Calvin Kattar, or when he came back after losing the third fight and he fought Arnold Allen, people were like, okay, Max is done, he's washed up. But he's not. He keeps adding, tricks to his game. He's fast still. He's, better with his precision, right? Like he's always been a bit of a volume striker, but the accuracy of his strikes is going way up. I really like the way now. If you listen to the UFC 300 broadcast, Daniel Cormier will tell you that he's just started doing spinning kicks for that fight. That is not true at all. Like spinning back kicks. But what he's started to do is use those as a counter when guys come crashing in, which of course is something that Ilia Topuria might do. I always find it funny when people talk about this fight as like, oh, Ilia Topuria, he's El Matador and Max Holloway's the bull, when really the dynamics are the other way around. I think that Ilia Topuria is going to try and hunt Max Holloway down in this fight, and Max Holloway is going to want to keep his distance and pick him apart. And I think then this fight comes down to who is going to be able to impose. At the very least, is Ilia going to be able to impose on Max, and is Max going to be able to avoid being imposed upon by Ilia? Which is an interesting question. And I think then what we have to look at is movement and footwork. And I think that Max Holloway's footwork is much better. And I think his bag, when it comes to, engaging in the pocket, using things like those spinning back kicks to get out of the way, to push people back, Max Holloway is better. And of course, he's way taller than Ilia Topuria and has more effective reach in that sense. And that brings me to, I guess, the next point that I want to bring up, which is that, Ilia Topuria, his resume is a little bit thin, right? His 3 best wins are Alexander Volkanovski, which is a great win, no matter how you do it, but of course Volkanovski coming off of a knockout loss, like a bad one that he didn't recover from. Josh Emmett, who, again, was also coming off of a loss. He was coming off being submitted by Yair Rodriguez for the interim title. And Bryce Mitchell. So, though, compared to, the best wins that we get out of Max Holloway, knocking out Justin Gaethje, knocking out Jose Aldo twice, at the very least going life or death with Volkanovski, just like putting on a pretty good performance against Dustin Poirier in the second fight. Even in his losses, he's looked great. But the thing with Topuria is that when he's had these amazing performances where you're like, wow, this guy really is that good, right? Knocking out Volkanovski within 2, the absolute shutout he pitched against Josh Emmett, or the way he finished Bryce Mitchell, he submitted him. I just want to point out that these are shorter guys, right? These are guys who are not able to use range effectively against Ilia Topuria, and guys who are able to use range effectively against Ilia Topuria do better against him, right? Yusuf Zalal was able to survive, and I know, okay, surviving is not, he still lost, but even so, right? Jai Herbert, who Ilia did go on to knock out pretty badly in that fight, but was able to really hurt Ilia in the first round, again, by using that range, by hurting Ilia when he tried to deal with that range by jumping in. And Ilia's very balanced, like he doesn't throw his head over his knees when he strikes. He doesn't throw these big overhands usually. He prefers to have, combinations while he's kind of, standing in balance. And then the way he kind of counteracts that with the range is that he likes to back you up to the fence, right? But I think that with these guys who are his size, he's much more able to back them up against the fence. This is why, when Ilia was fighting Volkanovski, or before he was, I was like, if Volkanovski beats him and he's kind of thrown to the wolves at the top 5 in a way that he wasn't on his way up, because we were thinking, who else do we even have for Volkanovski? I think that guys like Movsar Evloev, like Yair Rodriguez, give him a lot of problems because of their range, right? And I think that Max Holloway is the same way. I think that Max Holloway gives Ilia a lot of problems with his range, especially with how responsible he is with moving, with not standing in front of somebody, right? Volkanovski stood in front of Ilia Topuria. As great as he is, that's a mistake, right? Max Holloway will not do that. And, as time goes on, things are just going to get worse for Ilia. And I think that this is a problem that undefeated fighters have, is that when things don't go their way, it'll probably start to weigh on them sort of psychologically, right? So when Max keeps ripping to Ilia's body, he keeps landing those kicks, like the teep kicks, the spinning back kicks to his belly, and the jabs to his chest, and to his head, of course, too. And Ilia's getting more and more tired than he's ever going to have been in a fight, right? Because his only 5-round experience has been against Josh Emmett, where, again, he was putting up 10-7 rounds against those guys. And it's a different type of tired when, you're tired because you're beating somebody up, and a different type of tired to when you're tired because you're getting beat up. So I think that, Ilia's being slower than Max and being, more tired as the fight goes on, compared to Max, who's a conditioning goat. I mean, the last time he had a 3-round fight was against Ricardo Lamas, which is, I think, in 2016. So for the last 7-8 years, Max Holloway has had only 5-round fights. And again, I know he's got knockouts in the last 2, but he usually does go the full 25. So yeah, I think that as time goes on, as you get to the 3rd round, to the 4th round, to the 5th round, Ilia's going to get frustrated. He's going to be tired. He's not going to be doing great, and Max is going to find more and more success against him, especially because Ilia defensively he's not bad. People often talk about how he drops his hands and stuff like that, but he doesn't. He does, but it's fine because he's good with his head movement. He rolls really well. He uses his shoulders really effectively. But again, as you get more tired, you get slower at that. And against a guy with so much more range than you, that's, you're liable to get duffed out. So I think that, the longer this fight goes on, the more tired Ilia gets, the more damaged Ilia gets, the more Max is going to have success against him. And I think that, Ilia's not going to be able to impose himself on Max sufficiently early enough in the fight to compromise Max going forward, right? Like, he's got the heavy hands, he's got the heavy leg kick, but I don't know. I don't want to say that Ilia is the same type of fighter as Justin Gaethje. He's not, but his weapons are similar in the sense of if he hits you, it really hurts, and if he kicks you, it really hurts, right? He's probably more effective at delivering those than Gaethje is, for sure. But we saw Gaethje kick the hell out of Max's leg, and Max was fine. And I think Gaethje probably hits harder at 55 than Ilia does at 45, right? We saw Gaethje catch Max clean a few times, and Max was fine. So I just don't see Ilia being able to impose on Max. I know people are talking about this fight as a coin flip, and I understand why, but I actually think this is going to be pretty one-sided. I'm very confident that Max Holloway will win this fight by probably decision, maybe a late knockout, to regain his belt after 5 years. Guys, if you liked this video, please do press the like button, comment what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.